"Get your old hands off that stool," growled the biker, his voice low and cruel, a sneer twisting his face as he suddenly lashed out and punched the 85-year-old man square in the face. The crack of knuckles against skin silenced the entire bar in an instant. Blood trickled from the elderly man's cheek, stark red against his pale, weathered skin. But he did not fall. He staggered slightly, steadied himself against the bar with a trembling hand, and stood his ground. Around him, the patrons froze in place. No one spoke, no one moved. The bartender averted his eyes, pretending to clean a glass that didn't need cleaning. The manager disappeared into the back room. No one dared intervene. The old man said nothing. He reached slowly into his coat pocket, pulled out a small flip phone, and dialed a number with fingers that had once loaded rifles in war. He didn't speak a word when the call connected. He simply nodded once, then closed the phone and returned it to his pocket. After that, he sat down, his back straight, blood still trickling along his jawline. 30 minutes later, the distant roar of engines grew louder until it thundered outside the bar. 3 armored vehicles came to a stop, dust kicking up around them. The doors burst open, and out stepped a unit of highly trained soldiers in black tactical gear. At the front was a man with eyes like steel and a face carved from command and combat. He stepped through the bar's doorway like a storm on 2 legs and scanned the room with calm fury. "Where is the man who laid a hand on my father?" "Hi, everyone. Welcome to Echo Tales," he asked, not shouting, not pleading, declaring. William Bill Harlow was not just any old man. He was a retired first sergeant of the United States Marine Corps, a veteran of wars in Korea and Panama, a man whose bones ached from years of service, but whose spirit had never bent. His eyes, quiet and knowing, had seen the worst of humanity and survived it. His hands, gnarled by time, had once thrown grenades, dug trenches, and patched up wounded comrades in muddy combat zones. Since the death of his beloved wife, he lived alone, moving through life at a slower, quieter pace, holding on to the routines that gave him comfort and meaning. Every Saturday, he visited the bar he once owned, not for the drinks, but for the sense of place, of history. He helped clean tables, wiped counters, and kept things in order with the same faded cloth he had carried for years, a habit that connected him to the past. The bar had long since changed ownership, but the new owners respected the old man, always offering him a seat and a warm welcome, until that day. That afternoon, a gang of bikers had rolled in, unfamiliar faces, with loud voices and louder attitudes. Their leather vests bore violent insignia and names that tried to command fear. From the moment they entered, the atmosphere had shifted. They were not there to drink in peace. They came to assert dominance. Bill had noticed a puddle of beer seeping toward their table. Instinctively, without hesitation, he had approached with his cloth, just as he always had. The largest among the bikers had leaned forward, sneering, and snarled, "This table's mine. Can't you see you're too old for this?" Then, without warning, the biker's fist crashed into Bill's cheek. The room fell into stunned silence. Bill stumbled backward into a bar stool, his face dripping blood, but he did not cry out. He didn't raise a hand in defense. He simply stood there, leaning against the wall, his posture steady despite the blow. The bartender kept cleaning the same glass. The patrons kept their eyes down. The manager disappeared entirely. No one lifted a finger. Bill, battered but not broken, didn't shout or plead. He calmly pulled out his phone and dialed the only number he had ever needed in a crisis. His son, Colonel Richard Harlow, commander of the elite 27th Special Operations Brigade. The call rang only once. "Dad," came Richard's voice, alert. "What happened?" Bill's voice, though bloodied and worn, was steady. "Son, there's been a situation at Ali's. Nothing serious." But Richard knew better. His father never called during a training exercise, not unless the matter was grave. Something in his father's quiet voice, something unspoken, told him the truth. Richard stood immediately. "I'll be there soon," he said, already reaching for his jacket. "Stay put." Back at the bar, the biker loomed over Bill once more, enjoying the spectacle of humiliation. "Who'd you call, Grandpa?" "The retirement home?" he mocked, grinning as if the moment were his to own. Bill didn't answer. He merely pressed his handkerchief to his cheek to slow the bleeding. His silence wasn't defeat. It was deliberate. It was the silence of a man who had faced down gunfire, who had buried friends, who had survived war and loss and age. He didn't need to fight this battle himself. For once, he had chosen to call in support. The biker, annoyed by Bill's composure, stepped forward again, his fist curling. "Not worth it," came the flat reply, one of the bikers muttering to his companion as the crowd inside the bar continued to look away. That quiet dismissal, that refusal to act, hung heavy in the air like smoke from a snuffed-out fire. The entire room had silently witnessed the assault of an 85-year-old man, a man whose hands had once steadied this country, whose loyalty to service had outlasted wars, presidents, and even the passing of his beloved wife. And yet, no one stepped forward. No one uttered a word. This silent complicity, the willingness to stand by and watch injustice unfold simply because it's easier than confronting it, was the very thing Bill Harlow had spent a lifetime resisting. Not just in battle zones far from home, but in the quiet, daily choices that build character. When he called his son that afternoon, it was not an act of weakness. It was an act of discernment. Some wrongs, he knew, are too serious to let pass unnoticed. And if a man who once pulled wounded Marines from burning wreckage could be punched in the face without a single soul speaking up, then the real problem wasn't in the fist. It was in the silence that followed. Exactly 30 minutes after Bill placed the call, the rumble of engines returned. This time, not from lawless bikers, but from a convoy of military vehicles, 3 matte black armored transports and a Humvee adorned with an American flag. The sight alone was enough to freeze conversation mid-sentence. Glasses were lowered, chairs stopped creaking. A strange, almost sacred hush fell over the place as 8 men in tactical gear stepped out in unison. Their uniforms bore no names, no visible weapons, no need for introduction. Their bearing was enough. At the front stood Colonel Richard Harlow, a man whose name inspired both fear and loyalty among those under his command. His face was unreadable, his stride deliberate. He stepped through the bar's doors like a judge entering a courtroom, his voice ringing out in the stunned silence. "Who struck First Sergeant William Harlow?" he asked, his tone cold, calm, and absolutely final. No one answered. The bravado that had filled the room an hour earlier vanished in a heartbeat. The bikers, so loud and cocky before, now shifted uneasily in their seats, their glances darting, their mouths tight with regret. One of the Special Forces operators silently pulled out a projector, casting high-resolution footage onto the bar's back wall. There it was, irrefutable and raw, security camera footage capturing every second of the unprovoked assault on Bill Harlow. The punch, the blood, the cowardly silence of everyone present. It played like a courtroom exhibit. Colonel Harlow turned to the bar manager, his voice still composed, still professional, the same voice he used when issuing battlefield orders. though the emotion simmering beneath the surface was unmistakable. The man you sent outside? He built this place, brick by brick. He's not just my father, he's the foundation of this community. The bar manager swallowed hard, shame coloring his face. The biker who had thrown the punch began to stammer. I didn't know who he was. Richard stepped forward until there was barely a foot of air between them. His voice dropped to a level just above a whisper, and yet it rang with unshakable truth. When you strike someone because you think they're weak, you don't need to know who they are. You've already shown who you are. The silence that followed was deeper than before, heavier, absolute. Richard turned to his team with a simple command: secure the premises. With practiced precision, the special forces spread out, securing every corner of the bar. One operator escorted the bar manager gently to the back, guiding him through, filing a formal police report. Another gathered the security footage, sealing it for official use. Local authorities arrived shortly after, stunned but compliant. The biker was taken into custody without resistance, now just a man facing consequences, stripped of false power. Outside, Richard approached the bench, where Bill still sat, calm and upright. The elder Harlow had not moved, had not spoken, had not asked for vengeance. He had simply waited. Richard stood before him, straight as a rifle barrel, then raised his hand in salute. Father and son embraced, not as soldiers, but as men connected by values deeper than blood. Behind them, the entire Special Forces team stood in solemn formation, each raising a salute of their own, not to their commanding officer, but to the living legacy that sat before them. Bill nodded in return, posture straightening despite the pain, his spine remembering decades of discipline. Locals had begun to gather around the bar, drawn by the sight of military vehicles and whispers of what had transpired. Children pointed curiously, adults murmured stories, but what they were witnessing wasn't a spectacle, it was a lesson, a demonstration in real time of respect, consequence, and the power of unity. Okal,